Hello, and welcome to RiskOps AI CXO podcast series. My name is Andrew Beagley, and I'm the SVP of Client Solutions here at RiskOps AI. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Roshan Shetty. Roshan is the Banking and Financial Services and Public Sector Head for the Americas at Tech Mahindra, and Marika van der Put. Marika is the Global Domain Lead for Cyber Compliance at Capgemini. Today, we're going to be discussing end-to-end AI native continuous compliance and cyber resiliency, the importance of having in place programs that include a focus on automation, building resiliency, and then significantly ones that leverage agentic AI. So first of all, just like to welcome you, Roshan. If you don't mind, just give us a little bit of background about your role.
Thanks, Andrew, for having me. As you mentioned, I head the banking, financial services, insurance, and public sector business at TechM across the Americas. I have been in the tech industry for about 27 odd years, various kind of geographical locations that I've actually worked, so I have a global experience. And Tech Mahindra is an IT services and consulting organization that does tech services across all industry verticals, and it's a global name from a brand standpoint.
Thank you, Roshan. And Marika.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well. My background, and it also brings me to the topic why I'm here and very interested and working on the continuous compliance part. I've spent more than 20 years in Arch Anderson, EY, and PwC on risk and compliance. Joined Capgemini 5.5 years ago to automate risk and compliance, adopted security along the way, and currently responsible for the development and rollout in go-to-market of the portfolio in cyber compliance, so including compliance automation.
Thank you, Marika. So perhaps, kick us off here. What are you seeing as the main threats and challenges that organizations are facing, in terms of, the top tier issues that they're looking to tackle at the moment in the cyberspace?
I think there are four main topics causing a lot of risk and complexity, and because of the complexity they cause risk. It's sort of the one way or the other, but one is the digital assets, right? The speed wherein the digital assets are included in the landscape of our clients, making sure that you understand the links. That's one. Of course, cyber is one, sort of the attacks obviously that are happening, the complexity of third-party risks. The last is, of course, all the different compliance frameworks that are imposed on our clients, and how to make sure that you do that in a unified way, in a very efficient way. So those are, I would say, the biggest threats causing a lot of issues at companies these days.
Yeah, thanks, Marika. And then Roshan, just building on what Marika was describing there, how well organized do you think companies are today in being able to link the impact of those different risks on their business strategy, on their business risks, and so on? Is there enough integration there? Is there work to be done? What's your take on that?
Andrew, I think over the years, this particular area has got a lot of maybe attention, and actually also board level kind of discussions that have actually happened in terms of how to manage security and cybersecurity per se. From an organization importance standpoint, I've seen that the role of a CISO has become very, very dominant, and it has actually kind of found its way in directly reporting into the board, and in some cases being a part of actually the board setup itself, which kind of brings to bear that the top-down actually attention to this topic is very high. There's a lot of investments that are actually happening on this. There's a lot of solutions and actually policies which are being made in terms of implementing it. What needs to actually further happen is, while the awareness of the issues are actually there at the ground level or the operational level, the continuous actually training of what it entails needs to keep on happening more and more, because this space is changing so rapidly. You may have the policies and all that stuff, but you need to also actually have the people aspect and the training kind of taken care of to make sure that organizations are well protected. And the other part is that you need to also have solutions which are actually kind of taking emerging technologies into the mix, with AI, with agentic AI. All emerging technologies that are coming need to actually kind of become a well integrated part of these solutions and the frameworks,
Marika, building on what Roshan was describing there, talk about the value and the benefits of bringing more automation into these programs, getting organizations onto the front foot to help build resiliency and also to tie together, risk identification, risk prioritization, and remediation. What's the value there? Why now?
I think it's twofold, right? I think the obvious answer is to reduce the efforts using automation. Paul, I've been there, right? I've done the work in my work, risk and compliance before at the Big Four. I'm well aware of how the amount of work is to get what you want, right? From a compliance perspective. I think the other part is, I think that realizing and working at Capgemini in those complex IT/OT environments is I really believe that you cannot do without anymore, right? You cannot be in control without the proper tooling, without the AI agents helping you to create that risk lens. So I think the initial was reduce the efforts, right, to make it more efficient, but also realizing that the IT/OT landscape has become so complex that you really need a hand or really need that lens to get a view on the risks that you're having as a company. That's important. And maybe to add to that, that's a new, more topic that is coming from the collaboration parts. I think that each company has sort of tried to do this on their own, right? To make sure that you have that view. What I do see in this complex world, also people are trying and now sort of having more interconnections, sort of exchanging information. And I think that's good development, right? Because you're spending so much money on the same things that collaboration is a very important topic to look into.
Absolutely. So Roshan, just building on what Marika was describing there, talk a bit about the value that you're seeing at organizations of creating this single source of truth, where all risk, security, and compliance matters and issues are brought into one place. So everybody, whoever you are, whether you're the CIO or the CFO, the chief risk officer, so that everybody can kind of tap into the same information. Talk about where organizations are at with that and the importance of that approach.
You're absolutely right, Andrew. In fact, the entire data dilemma has actually been a topic of discussion for many years, and it continues to be actually a topic of discussion. The single or having all the data coming together in a single kind of entity or a single source of truth is what actually everyone is working towards. My view is that you need to actually have a very layered defense strategy in terms of how do you use the data part. That layered defense strategy has to be a fruition of actually technology, policy, ethics, and training all brought together. While we do this, we should also kind of keep the fundamentals still there, that you have to use and leverage the data to its maximum by keeping still actually the privacy and aspects related to actually kind of confidentiality kind of intact. So that's my take in terms of actually how data should be actually looked at within the organizations.
And Marika, Roshan was talking there about, policy, ethics, and training. Talk a bit about the role of, agentic AI in helping bring those pieces together, accelerate organizations' understanding and taking out some of the kind of the human touch here, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're going to be able to implement these types of effective programs, as Roshan was describing, for large, complex organizations, we have to continue to rely on different types of AI, including agentic AI, right?
Yeah, I think that's evolving daily, I would say. We have developed meta use cases, I call them, sort of the sort of activities that you can use Gen AI in, right? When it comes to policies and procedures, there's a lot of possibilities, as an example, where you can use AI to make it specific or make it more accessible from a language perspective. There's so much opportunities, but for me, the continuous compliance, all the steps you need to take to get there, right? The translation of the regulation and making the policies of the procedures, the translation to the systems to make sure that you integrate the controls in the systems until the risk reporting part, all those elements, all those steps, you can use AI in one form or another, right? So we're actually sort of developing on a daily basis, saying, hey, there's another thing we can do, right? There's another possibility. And we do that together with not only with the technology people, because they are very enthusiastic and building very cool things, but also making sure that we involve auditors, because in the end, especially when it comes to continuous compliance and resilience, you also need to make sure that auditor comes by and needs to certify they are trusting the system, that you can show how that works. That's how I see that's developing on a daily basis at the moment.
So Roshan, just, kind of as we're thinking about some kind of final takeaways here, just listening to the discussion, no one is going to disagree with this approach that we've been outlining here, right? Everybody thinks, this is the obvious way forward and so on. But there's still a lot of reluctance, there's a certain amount of reticence, and still a lack of understanding in how to get from A to B, it seems. I mean, I think we're all seeing that across the different organizations that we work with. And oftentimes that's for very good reasons. What piece of advice, Roshan, would you give to an organization that may be struggling at the moment, or, where everything is maybe on the CISO's shoulders or the CIO's shoulders? How would you advise them just to take that next step? What would that look like?
So I think there are multiple facets, and let me try and see if I can summarize that part, So I think, first of all, organizations should look at AI, agentic AI, all these emerging technologies as a force multiplier, not actually as the only means of trying to kind of do the risk management part. And that's the fundamental thing, that you should look at it actually as a force multiplier. Coupled with actually the right policies in place, you need to also actually have the verification process. Actually, if you're bringing AI also into the mix, you need to actually have a very strong framework and mechanism to verify actually that the data is actually kind of accurate. And then you have to actually have the overlays of actually ethics and training kind of applied over it. My message to the organizations would be like, use actually technology, but also actually kind of have the right frameworks in terms of process, training, and actually kind of governance mechanisms, which can all be brought in with a continuous kind of improvement as well as a continuous testing kind of an approach taken in.
And then Marika, a final question for you, if I may. Roshan talks there about continuous improvement. Just talk a little bit about how a company should be leveraging what they already have today to get them to the next level. So in other words, this is not about throwing things out of the window, right? We're able to use agentic AI in a lot of proactive different ways. You're taking your current infrastructure, your current programs and so on. Just talk a little bit about how that fits in as kind of the wrap-up point.
Yeah, I like the question. I think it's all about understanding what you already have, right? Of course, nobody starts from scratch from a resilience or continuous compliance perspective. So that's always the starting point when we talk to clients, right? We're working with clients. But you also need to understand especially what you're not doing, right? It's sort of, where are the gaps? Yeah, what you don't see. Of course, what we see, for example, clients that are looking for vulnerabilities in their IT/OT systems, but then they don't have a complete CMDB. So how can you then look at your complete picture? For me, it's about really understanding your critical assets, your critical processes, and then making sure it's complete. Looking at tooling, the AI, all the things that you already have in place, making sure that it's completely linked, and then create information in a reporting lens about your risk landscape, your controls, your everything that you have in place. Of course, important to not invent the wheel, because otherwise you don't have the speed that you need to solve the resilience question for now. So I'm very focused on those critical assets and making sure that you make it as small as possible and making sure that you have that fully covered. And of course, you can do that afterwards, layer by layer, making sure that you're fully in control on everything you have. I think the view these days should be on, okay, what is really critical to us, and making sure that that is watertight.
Marika and Roshan, thank you very much for these incredible insights. We're all on a journey here, and what you've talked about today, some of these points as to help organizations implement a more continuous approach to compliance, building cyber resiliency, and using different types of AI, including agentic that we've discussed here today. Thank you very much.